Hi, this is Michael Cohn from Advanced Tubular Technologies, and I'm going to be demonstrating how to set up the laser line probe, for example, on this demo tube. And I'm going to show you some principles that we have learned that help us to ensure accuracy is very high. So what I'm going to do is get into VTube-LASER and get into the scanner control. The scanner control window is part of the FARO driver, and what I'm showing you on the screen right now is a cross section of the tube. I'm aiming like this at the tube, and I'm just holding it in range. I want to go back here and press the auto button. We're in fixed exposure mode. We find that fixed exposure is by far the most reliable way to measure a tube. You can see that it suggested 21 for the exposure, and that's the critical setting. If our exposure is too high, then our image is going to get too hot, and the points are going to peak and trough in high points and low points on the data on the surface of the diameter. So what we have to do is be sure that the exposure setting isn't too high. 21 isn't too bad for this kind of material, but I would prefer to take whatever it suggests, and I'm going to go ahead and lower this value. For example, I'm going to cut it in half, and this works to a point. You can't go too low, because if you go too low, then the stripe goes away and VTube-LASER doesn't have enough data to actually measure the cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to let's say 2. So now the exposure is 2. That's not enough data, so we know that won't work. If we were to try to scan a cylinder with that, then we would have a lot of trouble unless we were to do what's called a wide scan, where we scan on both sides of the tube. So what I'm going to do is change this back to 10, and the exposure is now transferred. All of these settings are transferred back into VTube-LASER. You can see up here we have exposure of 10, and we have, for example, that it's a fixed exposure mode. So what I'm going to do to test that exposure setting is I'm going to go into measure diameter, and I'm going to measure this cylinder right here. Just grab a few points and see how accurate the measurement on this cylinder is. Now that 25 thousandths wobble accuracy that we see right here in the XY position, it's basically a guarantee of how accurate the points will be for the given measure. If we were to measure other tube that were more oval, we would see a much higher value. So the way we find out if it's the tube that's being oval is we do several measures in a row. So here we go. I'm going to measure again. We're going to make sure that it repeats. That's the goal. And I would say we're repeating.